In this video, we are going to have a short tutorial on the cardiovascular system. That is the system that is involved in the transport of blood to various parts of the body. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel after watching so that you can receive every update from this channel. So, the cardiovascular system consists of a system of organs, veins that are involved in the distribution of blood to the various parts of the body. The system comprises of blood vessels, and the heart itself. So in this video, we're going to look at the anatomy of the heart and also the flow of blood through the heart. The heart is basically positioned at the left side of the chest at the thoracic segment. It is slightly shifted to the upper part of the left shoulder. The anatomy of the heart shows two main halves. It has the right half and the left half. The right half is known to contain blood without oxygen, which we call deoxygenated blood. The left half is known to contain blood with oxygen, which is known to be called oxygenated blood. Now, the pictorial view of the heart shows four main chambers. A chamber is where, let's say, the blood can stay stagnant for a while. So we have the right atrium, which is also called right auricle. We have the right ventricle. We have the left ventricle and the left auricle or the left atrium and the left ventricle. So these are the four main chambers which are involved in the heart. So these chambers are where the blood that is in the heart can stay stagnant for a while. We have the right atrium, the left atrium, the right ventricle, and the left ventricle. So let's look at the anatomy of the heart and later discuss how the blood flows through the heart. So the blood, as I said earlier, the heart has four main chambers. The first chamber we are going to look at here is the left atrium or the left auricle. So this chamber opens to the lungs and receives oxygen-containing blood from the lungs. It basically has four main large veins, and these veins are called pulmonary veins. So the left atrium contains oxygenated blood, and it receives this blood from the lungs through four main large veins. Note the difference of these terms. When we say a vein is any vessel that transports blood into the heart, and an artery is any vessel that transports blood away from the heart. So pulmonary vein is an example of a vein. It opens into the left auricle. So you have four large veins here. This is one, this is 2, this is 3, and this is 4. See, they open to the lungs here. So this is the first vein, the second vein, the third vein, and the fourth vein. So these veins, they are all receiving vessels that receives oxygenated blood from the lungs into the left auricle. Now the blood in the left auricle is connected to the left ventricle at a point we call a valve. So this junction is just a valve that is made of two caps. So it is called a mitral valve, and because it also has two caps, it is also called bicuspid valve because it has two caps. So this is the first cap and this is the second cap. The contraction of the walls of the left ventricle opens the cap. The left auricle opens this cap and forces the oxygenated blood into the left ventricle. So the left ventricle is connected to the left auricle at a point we call a valve, which is also called a bicuspid valve because it has two caps, or a mitral valve. Now the left ventricle is connected to a large artery we call an aorta. This is the aorta, a very large artery. In fact, the largest artery in the human body is called an aorta at a point we call another valve here. So there's another valve here that connects the left ventricle to the aorta. And this valve is called aortic valve, as shown here. Aortic valve, and the aortic valve connects the left ventricle to the aorta. So this chamber, the left ventricle that receives the blood from the left auricle upon contraction. So when the walls of the left ventricle contract, it forces the blood out of the left ventricle into the aorta to join the systemic circulation, that is the various part of the body. So the blood that leaves the left ventricle to the aorta is known to be oxygenated and it enters the various part of the body, up here to the head or down here to the feet. Now let's come to the right side of the heart. The right side of the heart, we said earlier, contains oxygen deficient blood, that is deoxygenated blood. It also has two chambers, the right atrium and the left atrium. The right atrium, this atrium receives deoxygenated blood from the various parts of the body. So it has one vein here. These veins are called vena cava. We have the upper one and the lower one. The upper one is called the superior vena cava, and the lower one is called an inferior vena cava. So these two receives deoxygenated blood. This one from the lower part of the body, and here from the upper part of the body into the right atrium. So the right atrium receives deoxygenated blood from the two vena cava. The contraction of the walls of the blood in here forces the blood through the right ventricle through a valve we call a tricuspid valve. A tricuspid valve. This valve is contains three caps. So one here, and another one down here. So it has three caps. That makes it to be called a tricuspid valve. The bicuspid valve here contains two valves, so it is called a bicuspid valve or a mitral valve. Now, connecting the right ventricle to the various part of the body is another valve we call the pulmonary valve. The blood from the right ventricle leaves this ventricle, the chamber, to the lungs through a valve we call a pulmonary valve. So the blood from the ventricle enters, or the right atrium enters the right ventricle, then to the lungs through the pulmonary valve as it enters the lungs by these veins or these vessels we call arteries. So these two vessels are called arteries, and they are called pulmonary arteries. As we defined earlier, arteries transport blood away from the heart. So this artery, this vessel is called pulmonary artery, and this one also called pulmonary artery. This one pumps blood to the left lungs, and this one pumps blood to the right lungs. Pulmonary artery pumps blood away from the heart and it pumps deoxygenated blood, whereas pulmonary veins transport blood from the lungs into the heart. So that's the anatomy of the heart. It basically has a right atrium, it has a tricuspid valve, it has a superior and inferior vena cava, it has right ventricle, it has pulmonary valve, it has pulmonary arteries, it has right atrium, it has mitral valve or a bicuspid valve, it has an aortic valve, a left ventricle, and an aorta. So that's basically the structural anatomy of the heart. Let's discuss the flow of the blood through the heart. So this is another pictorial view of how the heart looks like. So this is the aortic valve, this is the mitral or the bicuspid valve, this is the left ventricle, this is the left atrium, this is the left ventricle, this is the right ventricle, the tricuspid valve, the right atrium, then the pulmonary valve. Now when blood leaves the lungs, the blood from the lungs are known to contain oxygen, that is oxygenated blood. So this blood enters the left atrium through the pulmonary veins, as we said earlier. These are the pulmonary veins that receives blood from the lungs into the heart. So the blood from the lungs stays in the left atrium for a while. Then upon contraction of the walls, these are the walls of the left atrium, the blood is being forced out through the mitral or the bicuspid valve into the left ventricle. The left ventricle. So the walls of the left ventricle also contract. When it's contract, by then this valve might have closed and it opens the aortic valve, and this blood flows through the aorta to the top here. So the aorta distributes the blood to the rest part of the body through these valves, or sorry, through these vessels, that is this part of the aorta to the upper part of the body, or this part to the lower part of the body. So these discussed organs basically transport oxygenated blood. Now when the blood goes up here and the oxygen is being used up, it enters back the heart through the superior vena cava. So the incoming blood here is known to contain less or no oxygen, and that blood is described as deoxygenated blood. Whereas the deoxygenated blood from the lower part of the body, like the feet, the knees, and the thighs, enters the heart at the inferior vena cava. So the blood flown from the inferior vena cava and the superior vena cava are known to contain no oxygen. So it is coming back in the blood or in the heart to the lungs to be oxygenated. So as the deoxygenated blood enters the heart through the superior and the inferior vena cava, these two blood meet at the right atrium and they are known to contain no oxygen. So in the right atrium, the blood is being forced upon contraction of the walls of the right atrium into the right ventricle through the tricuspid valve. In the right ventricle, the contraction of the walls later of the right ventricle also forces the deoxygenated blood in the right ventricle through the pulmonary arteries into the lungs. So the blood forced here passes through the pulmonary valve into the pulmonary arteries. This is the artery 1 and this is the artery 2. This one transport the blood to the left side of the left lung, and this one transports the blood to the right lung. So when the blood gets here, it gets deoxygenated again in the lungs, and it comes back again through the pulmonary veins. So human heart is described to undergo a double circulation because the blood enters the heart 2 times. The oxygen comes and passes through the right side of the heart, goes and get oxygenated and come back to the left side of the heart before it is again used up by the various parts of the body. That's how the blood flows through the various parts of the body. Thanks for watching. In the next video, we're going to look at the other anatomical structures in the human body. Thank you.